All right, welcome back to another week of Couch Caucus. My name is Amanda Bachman. I am the chair of the Hughes County Dems, and I'm here with Cleo and also with Bree. And Bree, which cat is it that is invisible on your hoodie right now?
This is Mochi. Yeah, and I got all the dogs, cats.
So
We're all here. We're all here for it tonight.
Yep. Come for the politics, stay for the cats, or maybe the other way around if you just like seeing other people's, fluffy pets that are really enjoying the live streaming. Yeah, Mochi is invisible. That's great. I love it.
You see my hands doing this, and you're like, what is she doing?
Yeah, it's kind of nice that, Cleo comes and hangs out, and like Mabel and Weasley, because it gives me something to, to like pet and de-stress, because man, it has been another shitty week in the South Dakota legislature.
Yes, it has. I also have my adult beverage and my cookies.
I've got my local beer in my local beer koozie. So yeah, cheers.
Cheers. All right, what's up first?
Oh man. Well, so I went to the lone live Cracker Barrel that District 24 did last Saturday. So I went out to Highmore with a friend of mine, and we were all socially distanced and masked and sat in the bleachers at the Highmore High School and listened to the District 24 contingent. So Duval, Mortensen, and Wisegram. And then two of the members of District 23 were there as well. It was Charlie Hoffman and Breitling. I don't remember his first name. And Hoffman's first name, I might have messed that up too. But Hoffman and Breitling were there from District 23. So it was interesting to have a panel of 5 of them. And I did live tweet it. So if you want to find me on Twitter, my handle is @ACBug3. I'll throw it in the chat eventually when Cleo moves. But they covered a lot of things. But the thing that we sort of got the most hung up on, like the 3 big topics that we talked about at the Cracker Barrel, were the Roundsburg impeachment, which at that point, the articles of impeachment had been brought as a resolution, but no other progress had been made because it was Saturday. And Senate Bill 177, which was the homeschool bill, which has since passed the House and is on its way to Noam's desk. And I mean, of course, she's not going to veto that. It's her pet bill. And then also the marijuana bill, HB 1100. Those are sort of the 3 big topics of conversation with the legislators. Afterwards, I did thank Wisegram for his vote against House Bill 1217, which we'll of course talk about because that has come back from the dead and been smoked out in the Senate just today. So that's really shitty, and I'm very mad at a whole lot of Republicans right now. So any registered Republicans watching this, this stuff is coming from your party in the state of South Dakota, and I really hope you rethink your voter registration or show up at a county party meeting and tell them to stop bullying trans kids. Like, pretty much the long and short of it right there. Ugh. But yeah, that was
I was just super thrilled when it failed in committee, and might have ugly cried just a little bit, just like this sense of relief. So I was not at the Cracker Barrel. I went to the rally here in Pierre. So last Saturday across the state, there were multiple simultaneous protests, I suppose, against House Bill 1217, but really it was also just a way for people to show up and show support for transgender youth in South Dakota. And so I was at the one here in Pierre, and there were people gathering all over the state in different locations. And so I'm grateful that our senator from District 24 did not vote in favor of the smoke out today. I'm hoping she kind of continues to not vote for it when it shows up again on Monday. So that's kind of for anybody watching, you need to contact your senators, contact them all, And, if you want to show up with some suitcases full of letters, especially if, women out there, because supposedly we're not able to lift heavy suitcases. That's
right.
some of the, yeah. So, if you want to just kind of have some subterfuge where you show up with suitcases full of letters or postcards, be my guest. Anyway, so Monday, it'll be on the agenda again for the Senate. And so be sure to be writing every day this weekend, sending emails and, yeah. So actually there were 3 bills smoked out this week, which is crazy. And what's frustrating is, again, like we've talked about this before, any bill that is introduced in the South Dakota legislature has to have its day in front of people. And that takes time. And then when it becomes these kinds of bills, you end up with over an hour of testimony and kind of debate happening. And they've got like a week left, basically. So all of the time so even today to have like this big issue of trying to get it smoked out and to have debate on the floor about this is time they could have been spending for other bills that may not get heard because they'll run out of time. And there are some really important bills that need to be heard. And, so that's just been one of my biggest frustrations with all of this is that we have this like handful of Republicans who, I don't know if we want to call them the Deutsch caucus or if we want to give them their own official name, the douche caucus. I don't know. They're just like this one group of people. And whenever these bills show up, you can pretty much guarantee that there's like the usual suspects are going to be the sponsors of these bills. And every year they do it. And it's part of their kind of, their agenda. And it's not just their agenda. Like that's the thing people need to pay attention to. Yeah. There are national organizations like ALEC, which we can put some references to in the chat in terms of who they are, but they're like the National Prayer Caucus. There are some national organizations who basically have a whole lot of money to pay people to write boilerplate legislation for all of these types of social issues. And it'll be everything from something that might seem pretty benign, like let's put "In God We Trust" in every school in the state, to things that are much more extreme and a violation of people's rights, like transgender bills, anti-women's health bills, and so on. And really, the purpose is to kind of create these litmus tests in certain states for things to be pushed to the courts and hope that the courts will rule in favor of those bills. And so South Dakota is totally kind of a proving ground or guinea pig for this bullshit that's coming out of these special interest groups that are not from South Dakota. And we have legislators who are receiving this information and then totally running with it and introducing these bills that, they're not writing these bills. They're getting the language from somewhere else and then introducing it. And, and it's all part of their own personal agenda. And granted, they're going to have some constituents that I'm sure are in favor. But for the most part, I think most South Dakotans don't support this kind of legislation. It's just, so again, I mean, I'm sure we don't have any Republicans watching us, but if you are registered to vote as a Republican just because you want to primary people and then you don't vote, but that's not your platform in terms of your policy positions, then you really should probably reconsider what party you're registered with and, at least be an independent. And think about this right now, because if you voted for the marijuana initiatives, let's just talk about this right now. Yeah. If you voted for the marijuana initiatives and you also voted for the Republican who is currently your representative in the House or the Senate, none of them are supporting the legalization of recreational pot. So they are working against your interests and your vote. And they are actively doing that in multiple ways in terms of voter suppression and silencing our voices. So, for example, they're delaying when the medical marijuana will actually be able to be put in place. It was all supposed to happen by the summer. Now it's going to be delayed. And then basically, remember, our governor used taxpayer dollars to sue the citizens of South Dakota to say that the recreational marijuana initiative was not constitutional. And that's going to be in court for a while. It'll probably work its way through all the different court systems. And I'm just really hoping the federal government just decides to legalize pot on a federal level. And then it's kind of like, then South Dakota really doesn't have a choice. But this is a justice issue. Like, we incarcerate more people, disproportionately incarcerate people of color for drug-related offenses that are non-violent crimes. Like, this is a criminal thing that isn't even, it's like, people should not be in jail for possession of pot. They should not be in jail because they ingested a drug and then be forced to like be catheterized and do all these other things to be able to, you know, catch them in the act of having ingested a drug. Like, it's really, really, the state is so backwards even with its drug laws in terms of how people are criminally processed. But meanwhile, it's okay for legislators to show up drunk to a session. And, you know, so there's just like this, the hypocrisy is just crazy. So the other thing that's going to happen, I'm guessing they will. So what is the status of that's the other thing. So the Republicans introduced a bill that would require that any initiative or certain initiatives that go before the voters have to have a 60% majority, which right now it's a simple majority. Yep. So 60% majority in order to be valid. And they pushed it to be on our primary ballot this June.
Not this June, in 2022.
Oh, in 2022. So so this is what's even more crazy about it then. I was thinking they were like declared an emergency and they're trying to get it on this one. In 2022, our governor is up for re-election. Mm-hmm. And Thune is up for re-election, right?
Yep.
They stagger that. And I'm guessing some legislators will be up for re-election.
So so how elections work in South Dakota, so that primary ballot, I think that the Republicans wanted to put that on the primary ballot because they think that people aren't going to vote in the primary and they'll be able to, ironically, pass that by a simple majority and then fuck us over for, you know, pretty much the end of time. So June 2022, it is imperative that people vote no on whatever that ends up being named on the ballot, because it will entirely hamstring the citizen-led initiative and constitutional amendment process that has been enshrined in the South Dakota State Constitution since pretty much the state was founded. Like, we were one of the first and only states that allowed citizens to bring things to the ballot in this way. And it just chaps my hide so much that they will trust the votes that get them into office, but those same people who are then also voting for, say, recreational marijuana, oh no, they don't know what they're talking about. So, like, please, like, stop electing Republicans. Just stop it. Like, just give the Democrats a chance. Like, they're probably not going to be, you know, hell, we're not going to be perfect on everything, but give them a chance to, like, do something and, like, throw a couple, you know, broom handles in the, you know, spokes of the Christy Gnome's bicycle. So anyway, this is going to be on the June 2022 ballot. And so, yeah, so Nome will also be, so the thing is though, like Nome, there's probably not going to be an actual, honest to God, like Republican primary of any sort, because what Republican is going to run against Nome? What Republican is going to run against Thune? Like, what credible Republicans are going to run against either one of those? So, like, I don't see them having a primary that's going to generate a whole lot of interest. So I think they're actually going to have to work. They're going to have to work hard to get their voters turned out on that. On the other hand, currently, we have no idea who the hell is going to be running for the Democratic nomination for governor. We could have a Democratic primary on that June 2022 ballot. And I think that will really excite Democrats and independents, because independents can vote in the Democrats' primary because we have an open primary, unlike the Republicans. And so I think that will, energize folks to get to that June 2022 election and vote for not only, you know, our Democratic candidate for governor, but then also against that, you know, measure on the ballot that is really seeking to essentially strangle the voice of South Dakotans. I don't know why people keep electing. Actually, I do know why they keep electing the Republicans, because they check off the boxes for abortion and guns and Jesus. And and that's what some people just think about, and they stop there and they're like, okay, fine, cool, and they don't realize all of the other stuff that happens during session that actually negatively impacts their lives. So yeah, like, and the marijuana issue is honestly such a lightning rod because it's such an easy to explain issue. Like, we want legal weed. Like, I voted for Amendment A, I voted for IM26, and I find it completely disingenuous that all of the people at that Highmore panel, all of those elected officials, they're like, yeah, and some of them did say that they voted for IM26 as well. And it's like, okay, cool. So you voted for it, and now you're the ones that are slowing it down. Like, I don't understand how their brains work.
Yeah, it's just, that part is super frustrating too, because I feel like it's super patronizing also. And then I almost wonder how many of them, I mean, I suppose, at some point you wonder, like, well, are they afraid that they're not going to get reelected if they do this? But then really, are they honestly that afraid? Because in most cases they run unopposed, right?
Like, Republicans don't primary incumbents. Like, they'll be fine.
There's this whole South Dakota nice thing here where you pretend to be neighborly and nice to each other, but really it's this like super intense, passive aggressive hostility kind of thing that happens all over the place. And it's super toxic here, actually. I have to say, it's like kind of like massive dysfunctional family where you've got like massive, the whole state might benefit from some like substance abuse, family dynamics type counseling, because it really is just like really, really toxic, especially when you get in talking about politics. And yeah, I mean, just coming from, Amanda and I both joke we're both like the carpetbaggers. I'm from the west left coast. Amanda's from the east left coast. And so, I come into this, yeah. But like thinking about politics where I'm from, and then here I'm just like, what the F is really happening here? Like, this is some of the most corrupt, crazy cronyism I have ever encountered. And yeah, it's just like, it's nuts. And yeah, I'm just kind of every day, it's just like, oh, well, it's just another day. Like, you'd think you'd be a little bit more gobsmacked about it, but really it's just like, you just come to expect it, and everybody just seems to be okay with it. Like our attorney general, the legislator decided not to impeach him. He's still refusing to resign, and he killed a man and is now being brought up on misdemeanor charges. And the governor even says that he should resign. And talk about South Dakota nice. Another Republican is now saying he's going to run.
Yeah.
He used to be our AG before. And yeah, so it's just, so that kind of stuff. And then, I don't know. I don't even know like where to go with this.
So going back to the what you're talking about before with Alec and essentially those out-of-state bills, and like the thing with 1217 in committee today, they had out-of-state proponents, and I do not want to hear another South Dakotan tell me that because I was not born here that that my opinion does not matter, like that I can't do this work in South Dakota because I was not born here, or that I can't be elected to an office because I am not a seventh generation colonizer. Like, the number of bills that the Republicans have copy pasted from other states and the out-of-state experts, proponents that they fly in or Zoom in to testify against those bills. The Republicans are not playing by the same rule book, like not even on the state level, obviously not on the national level, like that's a whole other podcast. But yeah, like if out-of-state ideas are good enough for bringing some of those bills, I think out-of-state ideas are good enough to, get folks into the legislature too, because we need new perspectives in there. And if you look at the people who are coming to work for the state of South Dakota, who are coming to fill the jobs here, because like, let me tell you, the folks that are in office, their kids and grandkids have left South Dakota. Like, didn't Kristi Noem's daughter leave the state to go to grad school? Like, that generation is leaving, and it's us out-of-staters that are coming in and filling in some of those positions. But no, since we weren't, born here, we apparently can't do anything, and it just makes me crazy.
You're only valid if you're from out of state, and you're also ultra conservative. So like the proponents for the anti-transgender bill that was just smoked out in the Senate. In the committee, the proponents who testified were all people from out of state, and they were flown in as these experts to testify. And yeah, and it's
it's absolutely rage inducing. And one thing too, like, again, as Democrats and as progressives, like, especially on this trans kids issue, if you are not speaking out against this bill, if you are not speaking out in support of trans kids and trans people in South Dakota, you are complicit in allowing these bills to happen. There are so many people that don't want to have those conversations with their family and friends, because turns out their family and friends are sometimes pieces of shit, like homophobic pieces of shit. You have to speak out against these bills. Like, you absolutely, yes, like, do the low hanging fruit of, like, change your profile picture, whatever, like, make it clear that you stand with trans kids. And if you don't stand with trans kids, like, I have a serious problem with that, and I'm not ready to I'm not going to compromise with you on that issue. Like, that is how strongly we need to support these kids.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like being that it's 2021 at this point, if anyone who's not going to be 100% behind equal rights for transgender people, non-binary people, LGBTQ plus, the whole categories, people of color, indigenous rights, women's rights, all of that, if that is still a hang up for you, then that's a problem. Like, I mean, we need to check what year it is, what century it is. And really, I mean, that's the other piece of this. You know, what's interesting with this bill in particular is that not only is it just, clearly it's hate legislation. That's what it is. And they try to claim that it's like, like people saying, oh, I'm trying to protect the sanctity of women, whatever the F that means. But then we get representatives like Rhonda Milstead, who, by the way, went to CPAC and spoke with our governor, who makes statements about like her justification for this bill and protecting girls in sports is basically saying, well, let's be honest, who carries the heavy suitcases and digs the holes for trees? And I'm like, okay, seriously, like, so clearly there's also just like this deeply rooted misogyny and sexism about, in terms of gender stereotypes and gender roles and these ideas of like what it means to be masculine or feminine and strength and power. And, and again, it's like flawed biology, because sure, there are plenty of men who are stronger than women, physically stronger than women. My husband is stronger than I am. That is a fact. Absolutely. But I could outrun his ass any day of the week. Right. Like, I mean, we're not he's not like all things more than me in terms of like athleticism and all those other things. And so there's that whole piece too. But then like, not all women, we don't all come in all shapes and sizes. We don't all have the same biology and biochemistry. And so that's the other piece of this too, that it's just so flawed in terms of the science behind this. And the other really crazy thing about this bill is that it is so invasive in terms of people's personal lives and privacy. So it would basically require that every individual, like I would have to sign a statement saying, like, basically kind of signing a statement with the threat of being sued, essentially, that my child is officially this sex or whatever based on the birth certificate or however they worded that. And then there is language in the bill about being sued, which is interesting because that actually caused some conservatives to be opposed to the bill, because then they were worried about these massive like because this would apply to college sports. So let's talk about the NCAA and basketball tournaments happening in South Dakota, which will not happen anymore if this bill becomes law. We will lose millions of dollars in terms of college athletics and people coming here for tournaments. The NCAA will basically just be like, we're not coming to South Dakota. We're not going to host any tournaments there. Forget it. And so, but then that would also mean that any athletes coming to compete here, if they are violating that law, like there's just like, it's just such a huge can of worms that they're potentially opening. And for what? Because they want to single out and target, and that's what's really horrible about it, is like, it is singling out and targeting one of the most vulnerable populations in our state. And so that is the part that just like, it just frustrates me so much.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do. Like, I've written to our members in our district, because I am the mother of somebody who identifies as being non-binary, and tried to explain like what this does to us every year, what it does to me as a mother, how like the emotional, just like, I mean, today I was like, why the fuck am I still here? Really? Like, I just want to like go somewhere else, move back to Washington State or whatever. And I'm sure all of those conservatives would be really happy with that. They'd be like, go, good. We don't want you here anyway. Yeah. And so then that makes me want to fight even more. But it's just so exhausting. I'm exhausted.
And that's where it comes back to the Republicans too, like the people who are registered Republicans, like, this is what your party has decided is important. And unless there's enough peer pressure from inside the Republican caucus, you know, if this bill dies in the Senate, it will come up again in the 2022 session, because it's going to be it's the same group of legislators that've got a 2-year term. This is year 1 of their term. Year 2 is next year. Like, these bills will come back. And like, we need Republicans to say this is a problem. And if you're a Republican and you're not willing to say that, or you don't think, or you don't think it's a problem, like, cool, go, like, I really don't need to be talking to you. But if you can't say that, like, get out of that party. Like, that is what they're standing for in the state of South Dakota. And in addition to railroading, trans kids, and all this stuff, obviously, has sucked up, 25 minutes of this, and it sucks up the oxygen in the room. And then like things like, merging the Department of Ag and Department of Environment and Natural Resources, like those kinds of things kind of like sneak in under the radar. And it's just, oh man. Yeah, there have been some really, really high profile bills this session. I mean, 1217, obviously, but then Senate Bill 177 was one that got brought up at the Cracker Barrel, and all the legislators said that they had gotten more communication about Senate Bill 177 than anything else this year. And that was the bill to remove a lot of the requirements for homeschool students. And it passed the House, it passed the Senate. It's going to Noam's desk. She's going to sign it. It's her pet bill. Like, it's done. It essentially like removes the standardized testing requirement. Homeschoolers had to test in, I think, like 3 grades, I think like 5, 8, and 11 or something like that. If they wanted to participate in extracurricular sports, they had to, enroll in like 1 class in the school district to be able to play a sport. Gets rid of that requirement. So like these homeschoolers can like go, do whatever extracurriculars at the school districts, but, not, do any of the other stuff. And it just, makes homeschooling like a lot easier with a lot less oversight. And I'm definitely not an expert in education policy in any sense of the word, but, I do believe that we should be making sure that we have an educated, electorate, that kids are, getting an education, which I know can happen in many ways. And like the public school system isn't for everybody, but I really think that removing those standardized testing requirements and just even the requirement to inform your local school district that you're homeschooling your kid, like, takes away a lot of oversight. And one of the things that I thought was interesting that a couple of the legislators said was that the pro homeschoolers were not willing to compromise, and like, which I thought was kind of a slap in the face. Like, Democrats, we get told all the time that we have to compromise. And I feel like these homeschoolers are just like walking in and like, this is what we want, and we're not taking no for an answer. And it's like, okay, cool. That's sometimes an admirable trait, but like, excuse me. It just seemed weird on this issue that they were so hard line, when honestly, it's pretty easy to homeschool in South Dakota. Like, this is not a restrictive state for homeschoolers, despite whatever like ranking list Noam was using to justify this bill. Like, 3 standardized tests in a 12-year period is not a lot.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I am a parent who tried homeschooling for a very short amount of time. And I can say that the rules are very, very laxed already. you basically fill out a paper and you take it to your school district. You don't have to give any reasoning as to why you're doing it, which is fine. I don't think parents should have to give any reasons for why they want to do it. And then the way it is currently written is you would then have to make sure that you have some way to account for incorporating an equivalent number of hours for math and language arts. That's it. And that's assuming you get audited or something and that they could potentially audit you. I can say, having like sat in or like joined several homeschooling groups across the board, not just South Dakota, there generally tends to be, most people tend to be doing it from a very kind of conservative religious background. And there's also kind of this very strong attitude about, the government doesn't have any right to like nose into the affairs of what I do with my kids. And so like even being up in arms about having to even show a birth certificate to prove that your kid is your kid, you're going to say you're going to homeschool them. I mean, really, like they're upset about that. And so, and I'm like, well, really? Why? Like, why is that such a big deal? So yeah, I think, and also, and the way it was before is each school district had that local control to make that decision about whether or not homeschool kids could participate in extracurricular activities. And I used to teach for the Lead Deadwood School District, and I had homeschool students participate on my speech and debate team, and they were enrolled in at least one class. And by that point in their career as a student, most families want the kids to be signed up for some classes for enrichment, or you find yourself in a position where you don't necessarily feel equipped to teach that content, or there's other things they're going to benefit from being in, taking a welding class or some other kind of elective. And so then it's totally worthwhile to have them do that. So my problem with this, especially in terms of thinking about public schools, is, and this was an issue that came up with COVID, with families unenrolling their kids, which, unenrolling your kids during a pandemic is absolutely a legitimate and valid reason. But there's also some huge justice equity ramifications for this in terms of funding and the way that we fund our schools. And so, in South Dakota in particular, we have like it's basically, there's this count that happens usually at the end of September where we take attendance, and the number of kids enrolled on that day in September basically is the formula that is the number that is used in a formula to figure out how much money the district gets the following year for their district. And so if you lose, and it's, it can be upwards of, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think there was, this came up actually with the Okchety Shakoween legislation for community school, immersion schools, where they said, if we lose 20 students, that's like over $100,000 in revenue that's potentially coming into that district. And so, generally speaking, when parents unenroll their kids from schools, it's going to be most often white parents who are from middle-class backgrounds. And so, if I unenroll my kid, I am actually hurting other kids in a disproportionate way, because now the district is not getting the funding they need to support the kids who need that money the most and need those services the most. And then the districts are ultimately in a position where they can't provide as many programs and services because they have less money. And so, and that is the nature of the beast in terms of how we pay and fund our schools in the US. And so there's definitely some huge equity issues with this in terms of parents and the whole idea of like homeschooling versus students being in public school. And it has, and so what this means then is that districts will be footing the bill, the athletics costs or whatever, all those other costs that happen to this. I mean, presumably somebody homeschooling is still paying property tax, right? So they are somehow supporting that public district. But it's just, there's a whole lot of that other pieces of this that just kind of make it kind of troublesome. And I'm just checking the chat because there's comments.
Yeah. Oh, one of the other things that bill does was parents don't have to, like, no, not even parents, but like a homeschool teacher. So a homeschool teacher, you can teach 22 kids and it can, can count as homeschool. So like, folks like can, make a buck.
That's actually already the law. Like the law says you can have up to 20. Right. I think it says you can't have any more than 20 kids. And you don't have to be certified. You don't have to be
you don't have to be certified, and you don't have to have a high school equivalency. Like you don't have to have a GED or a high school diploma.
That part might be new.
That part's new.
But it never, I don't disagree with, I feel like, a parent should be empowered to homeschool their kid and not have to be certificated as a teacher.
Right.
You know, I mean, so there's certainly parts of this where I absolutely agree in terms of just kind of, but I also, it's kind of, you know, it's to just kind of carte blanche, like just give people a free pass, though, I think is also a problem, especially if you're not going to at the same time provide for some kind of policy and legislation that helps ameliorate some of those costs that are going to now be put in the district's laps, because you just kind of, what this is doing is it's basically opening it up access to more students being able to participate in extracurriculars, for example, who don't have to enroll in a class. Right. So, you know, and in terms of like the logistic, you know, there's a whole lot of administration that goes behind the scenes to be able to even organize all of that, and to, you know, like thinking about your coaching fees and who's in the business office, you know, dealing with paperwork and getting kids cleared. And those students then don't have to follow your policies for eligibility. So that's the other issue. Like if a school has a policy saying you have, you know, no Fs or you can't compete, a homeschool kid, that doesn't apply. So they could just be doing, you know, they could be basically homeschooling and not doing anything academically and still get to participate in sports. And I mean, and I, you know, I mean, I don't agree with most eligibility criteria for students participating in sports anyway, but at the same time, again, this is a problem where you have this standard that's set for every student within a district, and then you have a subset of population that gets special treatment, and that's not okay. So that the law is definitely, you know, so what it's really going to do is force districts to change their policy, which may not be a bad thing in terms of that whole eligibility piece, but it's also like the reason why it had to happen is just kind of is totally bogus.
Yeah, I mean, Noam's justification for this bill was that people were not moving to South Dakota because our homeschool laws were too strict, which is like, no, they really weren't. Like, they were the bare minimum to start with, and now it is the wild fucking West.
Yeah. Not only is it the Wild West with our education laws, but also, let's just talk about guns for a minute. Okay, now, first of all, just as a sidebar, in case people are actually watching, we're both registered Democrats. Amanda owns guns.
I have guns.
And hunts a gun. I'm married. I'm an Army wife. I'm married to an Army reservist who has a gun. I'm planning on learning how to hunt, which means I will have to have possession of a gun. Democrats are not out to take your fucking guns. Like, come on. Like, I'm just so sick of this. So in Fort Pierre, let's just talk about local politics. It's a county, or it was a city, right? Or is it the county? Was it Stanley County?
Stanley
County. They're like trying to designate it as like a special gun place. Like they have this whole thing, like it's a gun sanctuary. We have open carry laws in the state that are just crazy. Like you don't like, and then, so now there's a bill. Hey, Helena. Hi. Got any opinions about the transgender bill? They got smoked out again. So now they're going to on Monday, they're going to be able to vote on, they're going to have a debate again about whether or not, mainly they care about transgender girls playing sports. Nobody's talking about transgender boys. So again, it gets back to the whole like stereotypes about masculinity and strength and all of that kind of stuff. So what are your thoughts? Got any comments? You just wanted to photobomb me?
Yeah.
Oh, that's Helena, everybody.
A little head shake. Yeah. Yeah. It's it was 12-12, I think, that got smoked out. That is a weird, like, you know, stand your ground kind of thing that's not going to be good.
So that one basically says if like somebody walks by and gives me a stink eye, I could go out with my gun and shoot them and probably not get in trouble for it. I mean, really, that's kind of, I mean, I'm being a little bit glib about it, but really that's kind of it's this whole like self-defense. It takes the whole idea of like defending myself to a level that's just like, if somebody, you know, and we put this in terms of you know, Black Lives Matter, for example, and young Black men in particular walking down the street with a hoodie on, reaching for a bag of Skittles in their pocket and getting shot by some white dude because they look suspicious, which actually happened, by the way. That was in Florida several years ago. And so, that basically, that's kind of the alarming thing about this bill, is that it just kind of gives people, again, it's this Wild West thing where it's like, well, he looked at me funny, so, I had to shoot him kind of deal. Like,
you can see me from here.
I can see you from there. You're just like sneaking away. Back up.
Yeah.
So that one is just like really crazy. And then, okay, what else do we? Oh, let's come back to the DNR and DENR and Ag. So our governor has requested that the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Environment and Natural Resources merge. And my understanding is that actually the bill actually stalled out, didn't it?
So she did her, governmental, or gubernatorial, like, hey, these departments are merging. And then the only way to stop that is the legislature, a legislator can bring a resolution opposing that merger. And so it can either be brought in the House or the Senate. And in this case, it was brought in the Senate. Senator Troy Heinert from Mission brought the resolution to oppose the merger of the two departments. That resolution was heard in the Senate Ag Committee today, and it passed out of the Senate Ag Committee. And so it will go to the Senate floor, I believe, on Monday. And if it passes the Senate, just takes a simple majority, that merger will be blocked.
All right. So another thing to write your senators about this weekend. If you have concerns about potential conflicts of interest and environmental protection regulation and the polluter, potential polluters being within the same department in terms of regulation with agriculture, which is going to be a primary source of pollution in our state in terms of animal waste in particular, and pesticide use, like that would be something you might want to contact your legislators about.
And I feel like I should also point out, though, that ag is like, the largest industry in the state. There are only two other states that have a combined, Department of Ag combined with another department. And those two states, one's Alaska, I forget what the other one is, but their ag industry is much smaller than South Dakota. So just for size alone, I feel like agriculture should have its own department. Like, there's definitely enough things to do in the Department of Ag, but, Department of Environmental Natural Resources, in addition to, yes, monitoring, water quality, they're not just looking at, it's not just ag that can be polluters. I mean, we've got other industries, in the state that can impact water quality. I mean, hello, uranium mining.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And we have lots of natural resources here that would also be part of that. So certainly both departments of the same argument have, they have enough to do in terms of all the things that they're charged with, that they really, shouldn't have to kind of like shrink their belts, kind of downsize and kind of merge jobs and what people are responsible for, because you end up with too much on your plate to be able to do your job effectively. And, and I also think about that in terms of just thinking about what's coming, right? So if we think about it in terms of climate change and the demands that are going to be put on both of those departments in terms of being able to pivot and change and do things differently in our state in terms of what crops do we grow? What kind of livestock do we raise so that it's more energy efficient or greener for the environment? So, like thinking about breed of cattle that you have and whether or not they're more feed efficient so they fart less and you're not releasing as much methane out into the environment. Like all of those things, like those are important. And those are time intensive initiatives that really, that's the thing. Like these departments should be, and we've got plenty of money. We've got lots of money, even without the COVID care relief, which the governor likes to pretend is like just poof, the money magically appeared, but really it's money from the federal government. So you just need her and Thune and Rounds and Johnson just need to shut their pie holes about socialism. All the Republicans in South Dakota, shut your pie holes about socialism, because all of this surplus is federal money that we're just sitting on and we're not using it for what we should use it for, which is really, if we just imagine if we infused this money into these, those kinds of initiatives, like giving producers a low risk incentive to try out a different breed of cattle and see how it goes without having to like worry about the potential loss if it doesn't work, or trying a new crop, or investing in some kind of value added technology and other kinds of micro enterprise type things. I mean, there's so many opportunities. It's just so frustrating. And then,
should we spend our last 15 minutes on local elections?
Yes.
So, yes, legislative session, everything is awful. But there are other levels of government in South Dakota, namely city and county level, and even below city, school board. And those elections are always in the spring. In Pierre, our election is in June. Did we say it was June 8th?
It's June 8th.
June 8th. June 8th is our election here in Pierre. And so I'm going to speak to this from with Pierre as the example, because every community is so different. Like, I do not know what's up with the Sioux Falls election, or what's up with Rapid City election, or like Chamberlain or anything like that. So we'll just speak to Pierre. But Pierre School Board has 2 seats that will be up for election. As far as I know, both incumbents are planning on running. City Commission also has 2 seats up. One incumbent has said he's stepping down, so there will be one sort of free and clear seat and one incumbent running. So last time that happened, when we had open seats in the Pierre City Commission election, we, I think, had like 4 or 5 candidates running for 2 spots. So I currently haven't heard of anybody who's running officially for sure for any of those, but we're still in early March. Essentially, petition season has just opened up for those local elections, and collecting signatures is the same kind of deal as when we would be collecting for legislative candidates or gubernatorial candidates. You have to be a registered South Dakota voter, and you have to live in the either city or school district or county, within the bounds of what that position would be covering. So I'm going to throw the link to the Secretary of State's office that has the municipal and school board, all of that information. There are the petition sheets for municipal and school board. You print them out, you fill out your information, you get them notarized. When you are collecting signatures, you have to make sure that you're observing each signature. Do not just leave a clipboard somewhere. I have been places and I have seen people leave clipboards out for signatures. Don't do that. You have to observe every single signature. You also have to print your petitions front to back. So you'll have your, sort of affirmation, some signatures on the front of the page, flip it over, and it'll be signatures and then the notary spot on the back. So it really, devil is in the details for getting yourself on the ballot. Like, people screw up signatures and that's how they miss out. I believe the maximum sort of threshold for signatures, or like the minimum number of signatures that you need, tends to be 50. And it's always good to shoot for a cushion. So, like if you're in Pierre running for city commission, you should be looking to get, upwards of 60 signatures just to make sure that you've got that cushion. And, if you're a Democrat or an independent and you're interested in running, we'll help you circulate. We will, run you through the things that you need to do. I've circulated petitions twice for myself for candidacy. I've, circulated petitions for other candidates, and then also for ballot measures. So I do like to think that I know what I'm doing when talking about those circulation sheets. But yeah, like those.
So you need 20 signatures for school board, and you need 50, up to 50 for municipal candidacy. And since our election is June 8th, those petitions have to be submitted to the Secretary of State by March 31st.
Yep.
Which is a Wednesday.
Yep. March is local petition season.
So if you are thinking about running, and kind of regardless of where you're at, check out that there's a really handy color-coded calendar. There's also kind of a cheat sheet on what all the things you need to think about when you're doing the petitions. And I do know that there are multiple local kind of elections that are up this spring in different parts of the state. And so definitely it's, and those are typically supposed to be nonpartisan elections. Unfortunately, they don't turn into that because the same kind of rules apply where people just tend to vote party line, even though you're not running under a particular party ticket. And so that's a great way to kind of, to potentially make influence, to have some potential change on a local level, because that's where people's daily lives are most directly impacted. So, thinking back to this whole homeschool bill, like if you think about that in terms of like how school boards are going to manage that, and even just thinking about other issues that impact communities and how we support children and families, a lot of that comes down to schools and what happens in the schools every day. And then likewise, just thinking about what, Amanda mentioned earlier, like most of these members of our Senate and House, like their grandkids have left, maybe even their kids have left, because why would you live here if you could go get a better job somewhere else that paid more or have better health benefits? By the way, that's one thing we didn't talk about is that the legislature is gutting state employee health benefits. Really just gutting their health benefits. And so, like why, if you're trying to, afford to support a family, why would you do that if you could go somewhere else and make more money? So there's a lot of that then happens at a local level in terms of thinking about affordable housing and zoning and, walkable communities, like all of the things that make a place nice to live and somewhere you want to be and you want to be able to go out and socialize with people and all those things. Like that all comes down to what cities and counties do and how they decide to zone and spend money and what they prioritize. So reach out to us. You can reach out to LEAD South Dakota, which is another organization that they will absolutely support you and help you and trying to figure out kind of how to navigate all of that. Also, the South Dakota Democratic Party is a great resource if you're really interested in running. I know like Del Rapids has an election for city commission. The other thing would be just great to get more women running. Like there's just, I'm just kind of sick of the whole good old boys network that happens here in South Dakota too. And if you know of other local communities that are running or have openings for, these races, just let us know so we can kind of get the word out. Yeah. Did I be me too? Come here. No? Okay. Anything else?
Next week is the last sort of full week of legislative session. So they've got 4 days, Monday through Thursday, to get everything done. And then they're off until March 29th, which is when they come back for veto day. So in the off chance that Kristi Noem vetoed anything, they would, be able to come back and overturn those vetoes. I don't think she's going to veto anything. Like they're passing things that she loves. Roundsburg, I believe Hyde County set a court date for the 12th of March. So depending on how fast things progress in the courts for him, the impeachment resolution was essentially like put on hold until the court case is complete. So there is a chance that whenever he's either acquitted or, found guilty or found not guilty of the misdemeanor charges, that the legislature could still pick up the impeachment again. But it's looking like, I don't know, I just feel like they lost their spines entirely when it came to that. Because the thing with impeachment is it does not require illegal activity. It's just behavior unbecoming of, the office, which clearly Brownsburg, many things he did that were unbecoming of, the state's top cop, I feel would be grounds for impeachment, and he should not be in that office anymore. So yeah, so we'll see what happens for that. If you're somehow unfamiliar with the case, like, congratulations, maybe you could be a juror. Like, I feel like their test is going to be like, can you pronounce Ravnsburg? Like, they, write his name. It's like, how do you pronounce this? And if you can pronounce it correctly, like, you know too much about the case. But if you haven't followed any of the other sort of news reports about that, I would recommend that you go back to the when the resolution had its hearing in committee, and Nick Nemec, one of Joe Beaver's cousins, spoke at that hearing, and talked about Joe and sort of the impact of what happened, and what he thought about the impeachment proceedings, which obviously he supports impeachment. I recommend listening to that, because it really puts that face to everything that's been happening. And it's easy to get jaded by South Dakota politics, and maybe you're just like, oh yeah, everybody's like super corrupt and like whatever, it doesn't matter. But I would listen to Nick Nemec's testimony, and like remind yourself that like these local elections really matter. Like, these people are making decisions that impact your life, that they impact other South Dakotans' lives. And we've got folks in office right now that are kind of cowardly. Like, they're not willing to make the hard choices and do the right thing when it comes to holding one of their own accountable for his behavior. And then they also don't trust our votes. They're fine with the votes getting them into office, but once you start having an opinion outside of electing them, they don't want to hear it. So take a look at your local elections. Get ready for the June primary this year. Get involved whenever your local community has local candidate forums. Make sure that you're participating in those as much as you can. Hopefully we're getting closer to some solid vaccine rates, so that we can have not the risk of giving each other COVID. But get to know those local candidates. Even if you're not running yourself, those are the folks that once they're elected, school board and city council, or county commission, are like we say a lot, making the decisions that impact your daily lives. So I think with that, we are about at an hour. So Bree, any closing thoughts before we sign off?
No, I think we'll just see you guys next week. And then I think after next week, we just go to kind of maybe an every other week type deal, depending on kind of what, and we'll be shifting our focus. Hopefully by then we'll know people who are running, and we'll try to get some people on here to talk about kind of what their vision is for their campaigns, and we'll kind of go from there. And if you're following us and you're checking out the chat, it looks like we got spammed on YouTube.
Yeah, whatever. They're having a good time with the microchips. So we will talk to you guys next week. Thanks.
Bye.